Hello and a warm welcome to the Masterclass series. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. I want to extend a special welcome to everyone who's joining us from South Africa. If you've joined us from outside the country, please let us know. We'll give you a bit of a shout out. Let us know where you're joining us from. My name is Nozipo Shabalala, and I am so pleased, so ever so pleased that somebody that inspires me personally so much has said yes to our invitation. And that is an invitation to come into this conversational space and to decode his leadership practice with us, to decode his leadership philosophy with us, and to talk to us a bit frankly and intimately about not only how he leads others and his ambitions of leadership in the country, but how he leads himself. And that's what these conversations are all about. So a big welcome to Songezo, Zibi. Butwami, thank you so much for making the time for us.
Nozipo, thank you so much for having me on, and thanks for doing these conversations. I think they're incredible because they provide all of us an opportunity to learn from one another and to hear from other people, on how we can create, I think, what can be a better and constructive leadership culture in South Africa.
No, thank you. And I think we definitely take that on and really thinking about how do we lift lessons and make leadership such a practical experience for all of us. So I'll tell you a little bit of a warning that I got, Songezo, about you before this conversation. Everybody said, whatever you do, don't go into politics. Keep the politicians out of this. We don't want to hear from the politicians. And I said,
I always can't wait to stay out of politics, by the way.
I said, guys, at the end of the day, if there's ever a contracting between those who lead and those being led, it's probably in that political arena. And the election process is one of those national conversations that I think is just so important. So no, we're not going to stay away from the politicians. And as a person who's got a background in political sciences, not in politics, this is a conversation that we definitely needed to have. So Songezo, how we start is on a not so serious note. So we just want to get to know you a little bit better. And so I don't want you to think too deeply about these answers. Gut reaction is what we're looking for. So
Sure.
Take us to your childhood first. Did you have a childhood nickname that your friends or your family bestowed on you that's followed you?
I did. I can't share it.
Hi, Songezo. This is getting close. What's the nickname?
I did. I can't. It's terrible.
Guys, I'm gonna keep
I would
working
never
on
hear the last of it.
We're going to keep working on him. We've got an hour together. I'm going to circle back. I've spent some time in this interviewing space, so I think I'll track him. I'll weigh him down. So let me go for an easier one then. In your friendship circles.
Sorry, but by the way, my surname is my nickname for many people because back in the 80s, there was a anti-littering campaign that said "Zap it in the Zibi." And so people tended to use my surname, so to say Zibi, but kind of teasing, but it's my surname. So people would say, "Hey Zibi Ken." My best friend used to call me like Zibi Ken. My best friend at Res, in high school. But the one I'm not going to share with you is the one that my family back home uses. I'm not sharing that one.
So, Makashula Ghana or anybody who might be watching, you have my WhatsApp number. You can tell me what the name is.
Know it.
and we can take it from there. I'm counting on you. If you're there and you consider yourself my brother, let me know. Bakwe, thank you so much for your shout out. So I want to go to your friendship circle, Songezo.
Yes.
You're in your friendship circle. It's a social environment. Who are you in that space? Are you the singer? Are you the dancer? Are you the DJ? Are you the barman? Where is Songezo in this social circle mostly?
So, I actually laugh at people. I mean, people form impressions, I suppose, from what we do professionally. And I'm always fascinated to observe what people think of me, like I'm stuck up and all these kind of things. So I can do stand-up comedy, by the way. I'm really good at it. Right. So if you had to talk to people that were at Upside, if any of them is listening, I would MC first of all, and wouldn't hire a comedian because I would do it where it's appropriate, like in board and exco functions. I would also do it for my team when I headed up marketing and comms at ABSA. I would do a stand-up routine for them. I've also done it for the guys at Rise, by the way, at the theater on the square in Sandton. But I sort of like did a sort of a quick impromptu thing, and as they're beginning to laugh, I left it. They're like, "Hey!"
I find it very hard to believe. Like, it's one of those things that I feel like I've got to be there to believe it. I almost want
You
to say,
do.
what's your best knock knock joke? I mean, I think any comedian worth his salt has a knock knock joke up their sleeve. What's the best one you've got?
No, no, no. I don't do those. So what I do is I actually like read the room and the theme that I'm speaking on, and I create comedy out of it. From the moment I pick it up from the MC, I start by teasing the MC. I've actually, by the way, MC'd for Trevor Noah at the Million Guardian top. It
Oh,
was in the top 100 then. It was at what is this place in Hyde, not Hyde Park in Ilovo? I forget now. It's like
yes,
some funny Italian name. I forget what it's called. It's like got white walls and that kind of thing. I forget.
yeah.
Anyway, so anyway, I think Trevor. I can't remember. Trevor now was supposed to like deliver the comedy, but I was MC. Ferial was the edit,
Serial
and
Hafaji,
I made
please.
Trevor laugh. I made Trevor laugh.
So I think Songezo, that might be another claim to fame for making Trevor Noah laugh. I mean that that
He
doesn't
was
come
too
that.
small time.
But still, considering who the guy's gone on to be, and I'm seeing a couple of people who are joining us, and I'll give them a shout out now. But MC slash comedian, I never saw that coming. Let me ask you two more.
Yeah.
When your friends gossip about you, and they're saying, that irritating, annoying thing about Songezo, what do you think they're probably saying?
Um, I think maybe it might be trying to be structured about everything, right? I think it may be that. But I actually don't know. We all think we're wonderful, right? We don't think we annoy our friends.
Listen, every now and then we get sobered up by some of those friendship circles. So a little bit too much structure. And then the last one is this: that we've all been sort of glued, or most of us have been sort of glued on the Olympics. What's the sport that you're following when you're watching the Olympics? I mean, what is it? Is it the relays? Is it athletics? Is it the swimming? What are you tracking?
I used to kind of focus on athletics, only track in particular, until we started doing well in the swimming. And then now
Mm.
I've kind of become like a swimming person. By the way, I can swim. Not all of us can swim. So I can swim. And so I watched the swimming. And then obviously the athletics. I mean, the relay, I've absolutely got to see the 100, 200, 400 meters, the 800
Yeah.
meters I've got to see. I always have to see the Kenyans and the Ethiopians from
Yes.
1,500 meters up. Although the Americans increasingly, I think they're kind of developing the ability to run these middle distances competitively and so on. And then the
Yeah.
Kenyans weren't so competitive this time around. So yeah, but the relays I have to
Yeah.
see. And I also
Yeah.
have to see Noah Lyles not winning, which
He's
was a nice bonus for me after
Yeah.
those comments.
But I must say, I mean, I also follow the long distance, and Faith Kipyegon from Kenya for me was an absolute standout star. And of
Yeah.
course, I think we've all been watching Simone Biles because she just has so much coverage. But I think as a country, we tend to sway towards where our winners are, and it's no surprise to me that you're following the swimming as well. I'm going to find out in this conversation how a person born in Kanduli at the time when you were born learns to swim and where that happens. But before we get there, let me do a quick shout out to Kiamu who's joining us from the Isle of Man. Dr. Huetsoni
Hey!
says, I'm so happy to be here. Chiamba says, nice masterclass. Tebogo Mlwalusi, is also here. And Pakwe says, please, Songezo, not all of us can't swim. And he says, but I now believe the Trevor Noah story for sure. So I want to go to where Songezo first sort of sees leadership modeled for him. So I want you to take us back to the beginning. You describe yourself in many platforms as a village person. Take us back to Mkanduli. Who raises you? And where is that sense of, oh, this is leadership? Where does that come from?
So my grandparents raised me. So I'm the first grandchild at home. Songezo means ukongeza, to add. So I was their child, because in our culture, at least where I come from, the first grandchild belongs to the grandparents, and so I was raised by my grandparents. And I'm told that my grandfather used to drink a lot and wasn't a great parent. And I was the first child he got to be like a serious parent with, and at least from a young age. And when I get told about what he used to get up to, I think they're talking about a completely different person. But my grandfather and my grandmother modeled leadership for me, but also collaborative leadership between them. My grandmother was the badass in the leadership. No, she was a thug. My grandmother was an absolute thug, and my grandfather was a good cop. He would like sometimes say, let it beat up someone and to submission, and then he comes and he like intervenes when the beating has gone on for too long. But they were a really great partnership in that way, whether it was parenting, and they showed me that you don't need to have a title to lead. You don't need. They played. Both of them played a leadership role in the church. My grandfather was a school principal, but our post box at home was also the village post box. He was occasionally an ambulance driver in his bakkie when somebody was sick, take them to hospital and that. And my grandfather was respected, particularly because he took his village responsibilities really seriously. And so people follow the lead, and he wasn't the only one. There were like men his age who took over a surrogate fathership role for many people whose fathers were working in the mines. And that's where I learned leadership from both of them and other elders in the village.
I think that at some point we need to write a book about these maternal thugs that have raised so many of us. And I speak as one who's been raised by one herself. My mother was an absolute badass, and I don't think I could have had that language that you've just shared with me, to describe as a thug. But I get that. It's this idea of a leadership that is instructive, that is focused, that is really, really intentional. And yet, Songezo, you gravitate towards the leadership, what I'm hearing you say, that is more bridge building, that is more of in service, that is more in collaborative, coming through your grandfather, which is more community centered. When you think about the kind of traits that make you a leader and an effective leader, do you get the sense that you're pulling from both sources, from your grandmother and your grandfather, or is there a bias towards one over the other?
I try and consciously draw lessons from both of them. I don't know strictly. Which of the two is more dominant, but I believe that respect and compassion are very essential elements of leadership. That you need to be able to get people to do things without using your title. To work together, to do without using the powers that you have statutorily, and I think it's possible. I try and not domineer people, and try and kind of get them to work together towards a certain goal, but step in at difficult moments, when things aren't moving, or they're going around in circles, or somebody needs to step up and do the difficult part of the work, and that sort of thing, which I find in some spaces, or for people used to different styles of leadership, can be frustrating, I suppose. But I also come from a culture where, like I said, a leader is somebody who takes responsibility and gets things done. That's a
Yeah.
leader. It's not your title.
And do
Uh,
you get yeah, go for it.
no, and I'm saying, it just reduces the possibility that you may become a toxic leader.
Yeah. Do you think
Because then you tend to want certain things to be respected, to be referred to by your title, and all of these kind of things. And I struggle in Parliament being called chair, as if it's my name.
and and I think that's really interesting because you talk about this idea, and it's reminding me of the conversation we had with Tiko Thomas, which was we had a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah,
where Tiko acknowledges that he's a marketeer at heart,
yeah,
and
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
his ability, to sell ideas that gets people to follow him, or to do the things that he needs them to do as a leader. Do you think it's your communications muscle? Do you lean on that a lot to be able to create the kind of energy and the kind of emotive pull that allows you the benefit of putting down the position, the title, and potentially, the other tools of leadership, because you can connect with people in a different way that they want to follow where you're going.
Yeah, communication is a very important tool in the leadership arsenal, and both of us know Makashule Ghana, and him and I often have this discussion about how you make people feel intentionally and otherwise.
Yeah,
The choice of words you use, and sometimes you may believe that you're saying things well in the right way, but actually you're not saying things in a way that encourages, nurtures, validates, motivates people to get things done, especially when they've got to work under pressure. So my instinct, for instance, is when there's really lots of pressure, to show people as much love as possible. So I'm a
sure.
hugger, I'm a hugger, but obviously within reason. I'm a hugger, and I really believe that when people are really under pressure, and all of us have to get something really important done, the least you can do is to show them appreciation and love. And
Mm,
when you do that, they feel that we are all in this together and we've got to move. One, secondly, also to never shout at people under pressure, when
sure.
things need to be done. Because people then freeze, they do this because now you screaming at them, right? It's also kind of, you need to calm their nerves. With you being calm, you help everybody not to panic about what may be a really serious situation. Even though myself, I do panic, and get highly stressed, and my friends can notice that I'm not being helpful.
I think that's really fascinating. When you've just given us three really powerful insights. The one is to respond to pressure with love. I must say that I've probably not heard that before in a leadership context, because we often think that in times of intense pressure, that's where we forgo the compassion, the nurturing aspect, the connection, and we go to the hard sort of instructional, and instructive posture of leadership. You also speak about never shouting. And I think that's such an easy sort of reactive thing for leaders to go to say, things are going wrong. We raise the emotional temperature just by how we use our voice and how we then occupy the space as leaders. And I think someone can take never shouting lightly, but I actually see how it then creates that anxiety in people. And as you say, they sort of pull back in instead of going expansive and going, okay, what's possible? What are the ideas? What can we do to get out of that? And then, probably even a personal challenge for me is to be the anchor of calm. So, in the midst of the storm, to be the leader that actually, keeps things calm. So, I'm going to come back to this because I think there's just so much you've said there. But let me acknowledge Buntle, who says, by the way, I'm from Letile Tebogo country, which we now know county is
Yes.
Botswana. So,
We are
Buntle,
all Botswana. We are all Botswana in this moment.
Dr. Huitani says, I really appreciate your emphasis, Songezo, on key character traits of good leadership, accountability, being approachable, and the humanity of that all. Gugu saying, responding to pressure with love. And Bak was saying, what a great way of speaking to emotional regulation, this idea of not shouting at people when things are going wrong. But Songezo, I've jumped a couple of loops. I want to take a couple of steps back. We make our way out of Mkanduli. You get to go towards university. And then when I read your Wikipedia page, amongst other sources that as I was preparing for this conversation, I realized you were quite busy in student politics. You were part of these different, political associations on campus, and it made me wonder: did you always have a political orientation? What drew you into those spaces? And what do you think that you were learning in that time of your life?
Does Wikipedia mention that I dropped out of varsity, by the way?
No, it doesn't.
I dropped out. I dropped out. I was at what is now Walter Sisulu University, University of Transkei, and I attempted a BCom. Oh, I sucked at applied statistics. Oh my goodness. I think I used to get 19% or something. I mean, it was bad. And also accounting was dribbling me because the English was dribbling me. So, by the way, I hope Wikipedia mentions that, after 2 years, I was like, stop. I'm going to do communication. I'm going to do communication, rather, which was quite an experience as well for me. But, when I was involved, it wasn't a conscious thing. It was more of a sort of a peer group participation thing.
Right.
I wasn't thinking, oh, I need to get involved in this. It was more like everybody's involved in something. And I also need to be involved in something because you also go with your social circle, you're all doing the same things and you're participating. So I wish I could tell you it was deep. It wasn't. It wasn't deep. But it also had very important lessons for me because I also ended up being chair of the debating society at P Technicon,
so the children is following you clearly.
Why was shy and didn't even have a girlfriend? I mean,
but Songezo, I want to stay there because I think about we went to university at fundamentally different times in the country. I was in university in 2003. That was my first year. And I remember the Sasco guys and all these others used to always say, no, Zipo, you're so well spoken. English, no, you have to come. And I used to say, to use my Zulu, I used to run away with both feet because my fear of distraction and coming from a poor family, I was like, I can't afford to be distracted and not actually finish. And, and so I actually just shut myself off to a lot of things that I could have actively advocated for and been a part of. If you think about the potential for student political associations, do you see these as a space where young people get to build their activism muscle, find their voice around issues they care about, and something that should be nurtured and encouraged? Or do you see that, or could these potentially be seen as a toxic space today that hasn't really lived up to the promise of what it could have been for the country?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question, Nozipo. I think the one thing that's changed is technology.
Yeah.
And technology has taken away, has eaten away at our resilience in the face of adversarial situations or conversations or relationships. Because what Twitter in particular and Facebook, Facebook and Twitter, they put us in echo chambers, in bubbles where we only deal with people that we agree with. I was in the Azanian Students Congress, Azasco, in P Technicon, for instance. I was in the Pan-African Students Organization in high school and at university before I dropped out. And in order to win an argument in a student body meeting, you had to go to the Great Hall at UNITA.
Yeah.
and you had to try and argue the other guys under the table,
Mm.
and then go and play football with them,
Yeah,
right?
afterwards. Yeah.
Or go to Groove. For those I used to go to Groove, I was too shy, but like you had to do that. So you learned that you can be in a situation where there's an intense dispute on the one hand, but on the other hand, you can form friendships with the same people.
Yeah.
What I think is increasingly happening is that if somebody disagrees with us, even on one thing, you write them off.
Mm.
So the ability to build deeper relationships where sort of adverse views
Yeah.
are accommodated, not because you agree with them, but you share space and
Yeah.
you have to work together. That's gone. And I
Mm.
see that now, especially when I was in corporate organizations, in how much the younger people that come in sometimes really battle with arguments at work,
Yeah.
right? And also some of the younger managers battle with their juniors, right? Venturing an opinion that is contrary to what they may believe. That muscle to live with
Yeah.
adversity is weak, right? And so you find workspaces becoming ever more toxic
Yeah.
because of this inability. I have to smash you into submission or bypass you or get into a clique and we deal with you. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I blame technology. I do blame technology. And no, not in a way that says there shouldn't be technology, but I'm just saying it's
Yes.
one of the things that's evolving our minds and our bodies and society in ways that may be unhelpful in places.
So, what I'm almost hearing you say is that one of the critical skills of leadership is the ability to create cultures and environments where people can disagree, and through that disagreement, actually get to a refinement of their ideas, where people can debate. And so I suppose the question is, how are you using that you learned in your university days today?
No, so basically, the one thing that you can do as a leader is to demonstrate an ability to be convinced
Mm.
away from something that you believed because somebody has come up with a better idea to show that you're not threatened. Like somebody says we should be doing X, so I haven't thought about it. We should be doing X, right? Like, don't say not now,
Yeah.
or it's not important, even though you know it's important. And then later on, you come and you propose to Nosy for the very same thing that she told you a month ago, because you
Yeah.
couldn't bring yourself to accept that Nosy was correct and pointing out something that needed to be done. You didn't feel small, right, or
Mm.
diminished. And I think when you do that, you also create a culture where it's appropriate. A People are able to listen more openly to
Yeah.
one another and be convinced, to step away from, positions that are not optimal.
The ability to be convinced, and I think that's really powerful, and to demonstrate that you can be convinced. I want to pick up a couple of comments. Dipalisa says, spot on. The skill and the courage to have difficult conversations, with the aim of building relationships at work, has become so hard to encourage in teams, especially in younger members. Debucho was saying earlier on the point of pressure, to say, we know pressure is, in itself, tough, and sometimes it's even violent, and
Yeah,
responding with love gives people the confidence to make mistakes, to innovate, and to take control. Love is not a weakness, and love is not mediocrity. It's an appreciation for the human
yeah,
spirit, and the human experience, rather, and conditioned through the highs and lows of life and work. I think it's exceptionally well said, by
yeah,
Debucho, as
yeah,
well as Dipalisa. I want us to get to rise, Mzansi. And I don't
yes.
know, there's a feeling in my body that says there's a story behind how this name came about. Uh, I don't think it just, it's not a series of acronyms. or letters put together to form an acronym, it sounds like it's a call to action. It's a provocation. What's the story?
Eh,
Take us back. Where did this come about from?
No, Rise Mzansi came out of, the name was informed by actually work that we'd done, research in particular, where we realized a call to action would be important, and the concept of rising is a call to action in all languages.
Yeah.
Whether you are saying pakama, it's or you're saying rise, it says I must stand up and do this myself and get others to stand up and do this themselves, because democracy is a stock fail, and not in a derogatory way. It's a stock fail. If you don't put anything in, you don't get anything out, right?
Yeah.
And so there is no universe where we sit at home and
Yeah.
democracy works. The more of us sit at home, the more democracy fails. And yet we've got this sort of a contradiction where an increasing number of people feel that democracy, with justification, democracy is not working, so I'm going to pull back from it. So
Yeah.
Rise came from that. But there was also, speaking of, I remember a really difficult conversation around the logo. In fact, Debo wrote the beautiful note there. We
Yeah.
had an exchange, and he was insistent that we don't need a logo. Rise Mzansi is strong
Yeah.
as the name. So we had a logo, by the way. So he says Rise Mzansi is strong. And I was insistent. I'm a little older. Debza is younger and more epic. It wasn't just him. The room was divided. And so I was defeated in the room. And we went with Rise Mzansi without a logo. And you know what?
You weren't defeated. You were convinced. We're using the right language, right?
No. I was defeated. I must admit, I was defeated because I was like, yo, these guys, South Africans always go for logos. What is wrong? But you know what? I didn't take it personally. And I can sit here and tell you it was an excellent decision. I really appreciate that, like Tepsa and them were like, old man, it's not happening. And so we ended up with this beautiful combination of the name, a name that is also a logo. And I
Yes.
know people, say things like somebody created this for you. No, Tepsa was the one who insisted that no logo.
No, that's excellent. I think, it almost hits you between the eyes because you are expecting a logo, you are expecting letters thrown together to form some sort of acronym, and what you get is an invitation. And what you get is a provocation more than anything else. But Songezo, before you decide to get into the arena, the political arena, more formally, you have a long career before that. I remember that when I met you, I was at CNBC Africa. I think at that time you were in financial services with
Yes, I was at
Barclays,
APSA, yes.
at APSA at the time. But we also know that you've done some amazing work in the journalistic space as well. How do you arrive at this decision to say, actually, I'm going to rise for the country. I'm going to actually get into the political arena. What's the conversation you need to have with yourself in order to get to that point?
I must say that the most profound experience for me was being editor of Business Day. And it was during the state capture years. And oh my goodness. South Africans back then were sort of the glass half full people. They would say you exaggerating, you negative, and so on. And I was having many, many civil servants talking to me about what was happening in the government and happening, in ministries and state-owned entities and so on. And I could see that this is a sort of a crisis coming in the next few years. And if not enough of us stand up for what is right, our country is really going to go to the dogs. So that was one experience. The second experience is when I started traveling up north on the continent. I must tell South Africans, if you think things can't get worse, I must tell you they can. They can. I went to Zambia a few times. I went to Uganda, Kenya, and so on. Oh my goodness. You just you it breaks your heart, it shocks you, and it reminded me of something James Ngulu wrote in his autobiography about going into exile. James Ngulu was chair of the ANC in the Western Cape and a former MK soldier, and that when there was a lot of romanticism about Africa, and when they got there, like the big towns felt like the backwaters here. They were like, but it can get worse. And those two experiences, for me, in combination, uh, convinced me that if we don't stand up for our country, it's going to sink. I wasn't sure yet it would end up in a rise in Zanzi, but I
Yeah.
knew it would end up in some form of public service.
And so, who else do you have to convince in this moment? Because I would imagine it's a lonely decision to come into confrontation with the scale of the challenge that's looming. So you have an insider's view from what you're writing about, what you're seeing, the conversations. You have this insider intelligence about what's happening on the rest of the continent. Do you go, okay, as Songezo, I'm just gonna step up, or do you turn to a few trusted people and you kind of need testing conversations in order to convince yourself to step into the space?
No, I didn't have to convince many people, by the way, in the sense that I wasn't the only one. People are having the same existential crisis.
Yeah,
The question was whether we could find each other. That really was it, right? The people that have ended up with Rise, it made their own decisions already. The only question was where and how and with whom.
yeah,
So, but they were also close friends, right?
yes,
The late Luzuko Koti was a really good friend of mine. And we had these conversations variously amongst ourselves as friends. And that's how we formed Rivonia Circle,
yeah,
by the way, because one day we had like chips and cool drinks and beer, and we just thought, let's just form something. We can't just keep talking like this. Let's apply our minds, form an NPO, and it has a name and a logo. That's what white people do. They've got an idea, they incorporate it, and then
yeah.
they start working things out, how things gonna work, and so on, and build an institution. And that's how we started, and it just kept going, and we remained committed to our own idea. Of course, Lusuko passed away tragically, but it was not difficult I didn't need to convince people. I merely needed to find them.
Sure. And you know why that's so interesting for me is that I'm thinking about where where you were professionally at the time. You
Yes.
probably had a lot of options. You could have left. You could have gone and started a life with your family and gone to the UK or the US, whatever that
Yeah.
is. Or you could have stayed, but made sure that you were in a gated community with private healthcare, private education, private security, and basically paid for the kind of life that you felt that South Africans were not receiving. Um,
Mm.
and it's interesting that even as you recount the story, it's almost as if those things didn't stand a chance against the level of conviction that you already had about what needed to be done, and that it was a personal
Mm.
call for you to be a part of that. Would you say that's an accurate reflection of what was some of the unhad conversations at the time?
Yeah, and this is what a lot of the guys at Rise have had to go through. And what people don't realize is the level of sacrifice that people who do this kind of thing go through. People are in jobs in large corporates, right? Where they've got medical aid, they have bonuses, they've got paid leave, they don't have to work on a Saturday and a Sunday, and so on, right? And they forego all of that. They go into a political mission that doesn't guarantee you anything. And it's all out of commitment to the country. And it gets so difficult when, because you know what each of the colleagues is going through, right? Because you know what they've given up, what they are giving up. And when you're dealing with the public discourse, there is this belief that you're in it for the money, if you in it for the ego and so on. And you're like, listen, being a senior business executive in a listed company would do a lot for my ego.
Yeah.
Right. Would do a lot for my ego. And being able to go overseas for holidays and take my kids with things you'll never do. Some of us worry about our parents who don't work, who are
Yes.
elderly and unwell, and through all of that, what these colleagues have decided is that why others needed to go into exile and rob an island, we don't have to. Surely we can do something. And if I were to ask anything, is that in all of this discourse and the toxic environment, that there's a little appreciation for the level of sacrifice some young South Africans have undertaken to to do their bit.
So I'm gonna go to the GNU quickly, but there's one
Yes.
conversation and I can't shake it. Endlini Songezo, as you come
Mm.
home and you say to your wife, listen, I'm I'm quitting work. You know that holiday that we planned? No more. You know the things that this is what I'm going to do. How's that conversation going? And I asked the question because I think that some of the greatest leaders have had to journey with a person who's an enabler in their environment. I'm
Yeah.
keen. How does that happen in your household when you decide that actually I'm going into politics now?
No, I think my wife understands me. So this is not the first terrible financial career decision I've taken. So, so when I joined the Financial Mail and the Business Day, I was working for a mining company and I took a 60% pay cut uh, to do that job for a few years, right? Um, and so she kind of was used to that, but she understands the things that are
Yeah.
important to me, right? And that she's really supportive. So we kind of take the risks together. And I think the same is true. I mean, I know you're talking to me, but I'm gonna keep referencing my colleagues because I also know that the same applies to them, and they've got incredibly supportive partners. But part of what we also have to realize as a group is that it's not just us that go through these; it's also our partners as well.
Yes.
It's a bigger collective experience in that way. And I think I can't remember, one of my colleagues said, look, this journey is going to need our families to learn to get closer.
Mm,
And I thought it's a hell of a powerful thing that
yeah.
was said. So yes, no, when I've come and I've said these, she's kind of known long before I say it that yeah, going.
This is what's coming. And I think that's really interesting, Songes, as well, that you leaned into that advice around strengthening and tightening that community that's going to allow you and enable you and carry you through the mission work that was lying ahead. I want to maybe quote you.
Mm,
I read an article that where you're delivering a speech and you said that politics is broken,
mm,
and I'm keen as you think, to tap into where you are now, as you step into a system that you believe is broken.
mm.
How do we fix it, in your view?
We step in. We step in. You know, I said at I think it was a News 24 thing, could have been
Yeah,
some last year, that I am in favor of South Africans learning to get in and out of politics.
right.
In other words, if somebody is 29 years old, they love the country, they love they love the country, and they want to serve for 5 years. That opportunity, if that is there, let's make it possible. And you know what? At 34, you may go back to being a marketer again.
Yeah.
It's really gonna be okay. But there is this belief that you've got to be a professional politician. But if somebody is an engineer and they also a councillor in the Joburg Metro for a while and they're on the infrastructure committee and so on, it enhances that. And if you are 30, 31, it also brings a youth element into it. And people just, like, no, we don't want people from corporate. The people from corporate are Zibo from a community that she cares about. Politics is personal for her. And if Zibo does that for 5 years in service of her community and broader South Africa, what is the problem? Let's encourage it.
Sure. This is problematic because what has been modeled for us, not only as South Africans, but on the continent, is career politics. In fact, we often throw around the phrase that you have to wait until somebody dies before, and. And it's so interesting that you're saying it doesn't have to be that way. And that actually you can come in and get an absolutely valuable and different experience, build a new set of muscle in politics, and then step out again.
Yes.
But go ahead. I just thought that was just...
it's really gonna be fun because public service. We can begin to also lessen this thing that in order to be in politics, somehow you gotta be buffoonish and no, it doesn't have to be that way, right? You need politicians who are as good as the executives that they oversee, and that politics doesn't need to be your career. You know what? If any of our colleagues were to say, for instance, that listen, I'm doing this for 2 more years, and then I'm gonna go back and be a lawyer, I would support them. No, because I will support them because you also want other people to see that so and so came in, made a massive political contribution. They're making a contribution as an advocate now, or whatever. Like without shouting at judges, obviously. You can be a politician, advocate politician who doesn't shout at judges. But the point I'm making is we've got to ingrain that culture that somebody can say, I'm leaving politics now to contribute differently, and I'm leaving a business or the NGO sector to be an MP for 5 years, and then, widen your experience.
Yeah. And as I was saying, I think it requires a break in the mindset that we've become accustomed to about what it means to be in politics. I also particularly like your comment that politics is personal. And it becomes even more personal when you, as you said, when people come from places that they're connected to, but also embedded in issues that are deeply personal to them and important to them. I want to talk about what it's like now, and excuse my English, being on the inside. I want to talk about GNU. So, on the one side, it's Rise Mzansi, you're going into the election, fighting for votes and so on. Now you're chair of Scopa. Now there are seats in parliament. Now there's a seat in the provincial legislature in Gauteng. How does that change? How does that change you and how you lead within Rise Mzansi as a start? And then I want to talk about what's it like being in the GNU? Maybe this is the one time we get the inside story. Like, are you guys constantly fighting? Like, what's that experience like right now?
So let me first talk about being in parliament. So it's like arriving in boarding school for the first time, and you not even boarding school, like at varsity, and you don't know the lecture halls, and you think you've got into the right lecture room, and then you find out it's the wrong one, and you're late, and it's not this building, it's that building. It really is like that, right? And you feel lost, but at the same time you're determined, and that's what all of us feel like. You get into that environment, you're a little lost, you're a little overwhelmed, but you're walking out of here with a qualification.
Mm.
So it does feel like that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, from a Rise Mzansi perspective, I must say it's been a challenging time because I'm still getting used to not focusing 100% on Rise Mzansi.
Right.
And I worry that that pressure has also had a toll on my colleagues because it's hard, like I live in Centurion, I
Yeah.
work in Cape Town, there's Rise Mzansi, there's Cape Town, there's family here, then there's family in the Eastern Cape and so on, and it's hard, just the bandwidth that
Mm.
you've got is a little it's difficult. And it's also a time of transformation and change for the organization. There is no election now, like for another 2 years.
Yeah.
So how do we redefine our agenda and so on, so that we
Yes.
continue to grow and that kind of thing? So, but as far as the GNU is concerned, so we chose to be in parliament, at least at national level, to be in parliament, and we said a lot about accountability. We said a lot about doing politics differently
Mm.
and so on. And I think if you look at some of Ghana's speeches, which for me have been fantastic, he's able to say something really frank to a
Yeah.
minister with a
Yeah.
smile on his face, with a smile on his face.
Yeah.
But it's unvarnished truth nonetheless.
Mm.
To say we can't have so many cops outside this building looking
Yeah.
after us, but South Africans must fend for themselves outside. But
Mm.
he's saying it clearly, frankly, but with respect.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we felt we need to bring to politics, which is we don't need to demean one another. We can tell each other the truth without demeaning one another and so on. Secondly, the Scopa role is a way of
Mm.
making the government of national unity work. We're not in cabinet.
Yes.
We don't need to cover anybody's behind, right? But
Mm.
if there's greater accountability, it helps the GNU to succeed. You know what I mean? So it's what I always say about the importance of the rules. The rules are not there to police the smaller people. They are
Yeah.
there also to protect the powerful against their worst vices that
So
might be
it's
harmful to themselves and society.
so it's interesting as well, Sangoza, that you make the correlation between the role of Scopa also being to make sure that the GNU works. So it's really holding the GNU accountable. What do you
Yeah.
have to say to the naysayers who say it's only a matter of time? This GNU is going to lead to policy paralysis. This GNU is actually going to collapse. Give it 12 months, give it 18 months at most. And this is, by the way, something I heard in a presentation just last week as one of these Women's Day events. And, there was an economist sort of giving the expectations of the political economy of South Africa. What do you say to some of those views?
I was fortunate enough to be around in 94 when it became imperative for liberation fighters to get into a democratic institutional arrangement
Yeah.
with people that had been trying to murder them just a few years before and jail them and torture them and that sort of thing. We can't go into difficult transitional moments like this with a pessimistic outlook.
Yeah.
Because you also choose in leadership what kind of energy you want to emit. Sometimes you're not aware because of the pressure and that sort of thing, but to the extent that you are able to reflect. So I tell people I choose to be optimistic. And the way I am going to help is to make sure that Scopa is as effective as possible. Because if out of Scopa being effective, there's better accountability, better use of money, and so on, the same GNU people can say, see, we did a
Yeah.
fantastic job. So, you know what I mean? I can sit here and say, oh, no, it's never going to work. How does that get us out of trouble?
Mm.
I don't know. There are no guarantees in life. There are no guarantees. When you start anything, you might succeed, you might fail, but you go in there believing that you must succeed.
Yeah. So I have one more question.
Sure.
What do you do to put safeguards around yourself
Mm.
so that you might never find yourself written about in the same way as the people that made you step into that space? um, they say that power corrupts absolutely, and absolute power, and so on and so forth, the saying. But how do you safeguard? How do you build safeguards around yourself? And how do you protect yourself from the environment?
So, you know what? I said that to a friend, a journalist friend, after we got sworn in,
Yeah.
that I was scared and very emotional. And I sat there and I wondered whether the MPs who've been there before, for them, it was just another induction into a job, but they didn't have the same experience I was having. And the day I'm not scared anymore of being sworn in, I will leave, because that is when the purpose is lost. That's when the purpose is lost. I will literally be like, I'm good, because then I will be beginning to lose myself. It's not even about not being written about in particular ways. It's just you gotta always try and retain an innate sense of self. And if I no longer take this duty and obligation as seriously and as profoundly as I felt that day, then I shouldn't be doing it. Somebody else should, who is still scared, who is still nervous, who's still worried. Those are the people that South Africa needs in power. It's the people who are still fearful of the responsibility. So that's a decision I've made for myself. That even if it's in term, the day I feel like I'm just walking into parliament, I'm going through the motions, then I shouldn't be there. Because that's when you start focusing on other things, Nozipo, your ego, your title, whether people run around for you, and so on.
When the fear is gone, it's probably time to go.
Yeah.
And that I think is a beautiful place to close off our conversation. I can see that on the clock I've got about 90 seconds, so I'm going to try to do two quick things.
Sure.
One, what's your childhood nickname? One,
Ah, hey.
I haven't forgotten. and then the
No.
sec- and then the second one is a final message for all of us who are watching now and the ones who will watch the many reruns of this conversation. What do you want to leave us with?
What I want to live with is the importance of love. Love is really important. Love and compassion are very important. They're powerful. They can move mountains. And we must never be afraid to love at work or as leaders. And to lead with love and compassion, because I think you get loyalty out of love. You don't get loyalty out of fear. To the extent that you may get loyalty out of fear, it's not the kind of loyalty that makes you sleep at night. You're still distrustful. But when you
Mm.
love one another, when you love one another in the context of the mission that you share, even if it's in a corporate, you can sleep easy at night, because that's a reassuring loyalty and there's a sense of protection in that for yourself and for the collective. So that's what I'd like to leave our guests with.
I didn't think that I could be even more inspired, but I certainly am, to lead with love. And that's what I take away from this evening as well. Thank you so very much. Ndia, we see your comment. When the fear is gone, it's time to go. Lebo Moyana Nkosi says, very insightful, very inspiring. Bakwe says, a big thank you. Debuko says, love. And Colleen Davis says, I love that. Uh, we forget that we are human and that sometimes we all just need love. You get loyalty and love and not fear. There's just so much that's come up. Felicia, thank you for your comment as well. Songezo, I don't have
Thank you.
words. You've always shown up for me in the most amazing ways, and today is just another one of them. Ngiyabonga kakhulu bhuti wami, and thank you so much for making time for us.
Ngiyabonga noZipho, and thanks to everyone who joined tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.